Good afternoon, guys, and welcome to the podcast. I've got Louis Kim, and he is a leader and entrepreneur. He's going to talk to us all about his journey, his story, how he helps clients. And I'm really happy to have him on and deliver value to the audience. Louis, welcome.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. Briefly chronicle your journey, and we'll dive into the questions.
Sure. I'm an entrepreneur my whole life. I was fortunate enough to grow up in a family that was entrepreneurial. From the time I was 8 years old, I started working there in the summers, and through my whole life, had always been fortunate enough to learn quite a bit there. And in my early 20s, bought my first business and really put me on a path of buying, selling, and building businesses over 20 plus years of doing that. And in recent years, within the last 6 years, it's become more formalized where we take a lot of those things and I've created the company called Uson Capital, which is a private equity firm. And we now just go out and buy a bigger scale, small and mid-sized businesses, and we take them to the next stage and where we're going. That's really what's brought me here. And honestly, one of the greatest things that happened to me about over a decade ago was reaching a place of burnout. And getting to that place of burnout really helped me refocus and rebuild with such clarity that it's brought me to where I am today.
Interesting. Yeah. And I love to start it off with just people listening to the podcast. And we're talking about where's this conversation leading.
Yeah.
What is your client avatar and what do they come to you for? What are they wanting, needing, desperate? What are they hating, frustrated, sick and tired of to work with you?
Yes. Our primary avatar right now, everyone knows the baby boomer population is aging. They hold about $84 trillion in assets. It's going to be the largest wealth transfer in the history of the United States. And there's about 2.5 million of those boomers or businesses, small to mid-sized businesses that are owned by that generation. And 60 to 65% do not have a succession plan. So they've built these businesses and they get to a certain age and they continue to run and operate these things really because of the people and what they built. And a lot of them are ready to let it go, but don't have a plan for it. And so oftentimes we are dealing with those folks and we are in the process of communicating, helping them find a route to succession. If it's not us that will acquire that business, we have a network of referrals that we can connect them to, whether it's an M&A group or a broker that can help them through that process. And then even bringing them along and having accountants and other professionals, wealth managers that work with them to help them through that transition process.
Interesting. Yeah. And so one thing, you talked about the biggest opportunity of a lifetime. Just briefly talk about how to buy, build, and scale
Yeah.
small businesses.
I appreciate that. It's a great question. You're a few years younger than me, and reading your life trajectory, clearly you were very focused early on, right? And you took a path, went to medical school, and then decided that being a doctor isn't necessarily all it's cracked up to be, and found a path to achieving the financial freedom, which is really what we want when we talk about financial freedom, is our freedom of time, right? Like you have the flexibility to choose what it is you want to do. And when it comes to entrepreneurship, I think this opportunity is so big because there's a generation of people, especially people that are closer to my age and your age, because you're probably more like an older millennial. I'm definitely a younger Gen X. And we've grown up in a certain environment and seen certain things. And we have this opportunity where there's these amazing cash flowing businesses where if you've spent the last 15, 20 years as a working professional, working somewhere else, and you're tired of doing it, you can go and buy these streams of existing cash flow. And our country, the US, having this amazing thing called the SBA that guarantees loans, right? It's like, where else do you have this? Without the SBA, the small business would not have the liquidity pool that was needed to buy these things. And the thing that most people don't know is that if you've got decent credit, you've got some liquidity, and you've got some kind of experience in that field, they will guarantee the loan up to 90%, which means banks, they want to lend to you because to them, it's guaranteed payment, right? If you default, the insurance, the government's going to cover it. And so you can go out and buy these things as a professional, make that transition and make that step to ownership, because there is truly only one path to wealth. And as you've learned through the years, it's acquisition, it's ownership. You have to hold on to things. And I love telling this story. Forgive me, indulge me a little bit. To prove there's one guarantee to get wealthy. You find something of value and you hold on to it for as long as you can. And my example is, because I live outside DC, the former Washington Redskins, which is now the Commanders, Daniel Snyder paid $800 million for it in the late 90s. And people thought he was crazy. The worst owner in the history of sports. The man genuinely introduced obstructed view tickets, right? Where they would sell you tickets to sit behind a column. And he sold it recently for 6.2 or 6.3 billion dollars. Buy something of value that's rare, worst operator ever. And then I don't know what the return on that is, but it's an amazing, right? 800 million to 6.2 billion dollars or something. It's ownership. Ownership is the path.
Oh, yeah, I love that. And I think Tony Robbins talks about be an owner, don't be a consumer, be an
Yeah.
owner, be an investor. One thing I have question, because I've recently had a lot of guests talking about like buying and versus bootstrapping, starting
Yeah.
small businesses. Why don't, if someone has money and capital, why don't they just do like private equity, or why don't they just invest in real estate or stocks? Why should they go and buy small business and risk failure?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the truth is, it's not for everybody, right?
Yeah.
It's for the person who I was, if you've never managed people and resources and you want to go buy your first business, and even if you have the money, don't go buy a $10 million business, right? Because you're going to put yourself in trouble. Even with getting 50% from a bank, like it's a risk. But if you have the skills, then it is the single greatest investment you can make is in yourself. Because the truth is, you can take any business and the upside is infinite, right? The limitation is the mindset of the owner, right? And what they can do and what they can achieve. If you look at like Crumble Cookies, who in God's name thought a cookie company could become as large as it is today, right? The limitation is it's infinite. And when it comes to starting versus buying, the risk profile of starting is so high. It's something within the first 5 years, 80 or 90% will fail, right? And if you get to the 10-year mark of a business, you're in rare form. It's less than 5% of businesses that start up will make it to year 10. And that doesn't even mean that business is successful, right? So the risk is so high. So when you go in and you buy an existing business, you have the stream of revenue. And I know you invest in real estate, but it's very much like the difference between what you buy in real estate versus what you buy in an existing business. Unless the business itself has a bunch of fixed assets, you're buying an intangible stream of cash flow, right? Like there's nothing fixed. It's the goodwill that you're buying, right? The enterprise value. What you're buying is a fixed hard asset, right? And with this, and the thing with real estate is you have this consistent, steady stream of income. But the real estate market as a whole is a price takers, right? The market value is set by whatever you're doing. And so if you go into a BC neighborhood and you make it A class real estate, when you put all these amenities and luxury, it doesn't necessarily mean in that neighborhood you're going to get A rents, right?
Mhm.
Whereas on the business side of things, you're doing a very similar thing. And so for us, we look at businesses that have been around at least 10 years because 10 years gives me the strength and the basis to be comfortable with how consistent the revenue stream is. And then that's what you're buying. It's a stream of cash flow and revenue. The downside, obviously, is if you don't manage and take what's here, the operations of what's been built and the people, then you can really break it apart. But for the most part, if you're shrewd and you do it the first time, you go in, spend a couple of years learning what the person with all the experience has built, and then start making changes for growth. And then you have this thing that can go forever.
Interesting. So the other question I have for you is because you founded Uson Capital, a private equity, and then you built a coaching program guiding professionals to buy their first business and escape the grind. Question for you is, what I'm sure the coaching program is nothing compared to the running the. So why what is the purpose?
The purpose is I have a deep calling towards teaching other people and taking them down that path.
Yeah.
You had mentioned Tony Robbins earlier, and I'm a student of, and I did his program, Date with Destiny. And I've done it twice. And the second time I did it, I had this deep sense of calling to want to teach other people. As we scale to these larger businesses, there's all of these other businesses that exist. And part of my desire to teach this, I have a very specific clientele that I can help. I don't teach 50 different strategies. I teach to take someone from the professional world, use the SBA or some sort of seller financing or combination. We teach 1-2 strategies, very specific, because what I'm really trying to teach folks through this path is the path of ownership to buy their first business. We're not teaching you to go get a board and do any of that stuff, right? We're trying to take someone who's got a set of skills, got some resources to go buy their first business so they can build the life of what you're sharing, which is that freedom of time, right? Is to get to the point where you can really get there. And along the way, if I can influence them to be the kind of leader that I try to be, then I know that I'm doing good. And it's the desire to do that. And from a resource standpoint, they're not in conflict. It's me taking my time to go out there and do that because I really want to teach people to do it. And if anything, it's repaying the gift that I received from my parents and what they taught me because I was around it at such a young age. And so if I can teach that to other people to elevate themselves, because a lot of people in the US are taught, you get a job, you go in there, right? You punch the clock, you get your retirement, you do all that stuff. And then they get to a certain age and they go, man, I got this. I'm meeting a fraternity brother this weekend who's coming in. He's a prime example of it. He is an amazing guy, done really well for himself, the highest levels of corporate and business development. In the last 2 years, he's just wondering, what's the point? He's got money, he's got a nice house, kids are all in college. He's looking around going, I wish I could do more for this company, but he's limited. And I think that's where I really have a desire to help people to get through that and say, hey, come over here. There's this whole different way of thinking that can take you on a trajectory that maybe you never thought you'd get to.
Interesting. And rounding it out, because you're talking about helping people find meaning from capitalism to consciousness. And so
Yeah.
talk about how your darkest moments and how that's helped you to create the most impactful moments of your life.
I was having a conversation with a friend of mine yesterday about the paradox of being human. And this idea that because our life is finite, there's all this beauty because there's a limit to it. And the notion that we as humans emotionally understand pain, we have joy because we can feel pain, right? We have the feeling of love because we understand hate. And we have these balances. And so for me, I had achieved pretty early in my life of a really good life. In hindsight, when I look at pictures of myself from my late 20s, early 30s, I don't know why I was so unhappy at this different point. And I had money in the bank. We were traveling. My girlfriend, who's now my wife, we were going everywhere. Amazing. Everything you think you want. Everything that's the Instagram of like awesome trips, all this stuff, right? And I got to a point where I was just miserable. And I was miserable because I hadn't found the path to being fulfilled. And so we sold a business, did really well, sitting on money, and I was just super depressed because I was looking back in the mirror in my early 30s, literally with millions in the bank and not knowing what to do with it and being miserable about it.
Wow.
And it sounds so ridiculous now at middle age to think about it when you know the kinds of struggles that people have. But I think I had to go through that to get to where I am, because when you go that deep, you have no choice but to look at yourself in the mirror and really start to look deep within yourself. And that's allowed me to go and find this purpose and mission where my desire is, look, I believe I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a firm believer in capitalism, but I'm also a firm believer in making the world a better place. And I think those two things aren't in conflict, right? You don't have to extract every cent out of every transaction, out of every opportunity, right? Like you can leave it and just do more deals, right? You don't have to take. And that's part of the philosophy that I want to bring. And that's what's in our firm. And it's not easy because sometimes we talk to investors and it's hard for me to tell an investor, hey, look, the best way for me to protect your money and grow it is to take care of the people. And the short-term couple percentage points that you're not taking away, right? That's going back to labor, I promise you will be exponentially larger, but you got to wait for it, right? And you also got to be behind this philosophy. And that's why The owner's path, the coaching program allows me that to do that. But that would not have come, the reconciliation of those two things, if I hadn't gotten to that place. And I think what I struggled with at that point was I'd gotten to this place, I'd done well, and I didn't understand where I was going because it sounds very shallow, or it wasn't fulfilling. So I didn't feel like it was real. And I just needed to work through that. And once you work through it, the paradox of being human takes you from this really dark place to just being so purpose and mission driven that I'm fulfilled every day that I get to do this. Every day I get to go to talk to people. Every day I get to do things like this and share. It's fulfilling. That's why I do it.
Fascinating. If people wanted to learn more about you and connect with you and check out your work, how could they do that?
When it comes to the apprenticeship, you can reach out. It's just theownerspath.com. That's the website. And then you can also find me on Instagram and TikTok, which is a little more personal stuff. And that's just parts of Lou.
Excellent. I really enjoyed this talk from a fellow Tony Robbins enthusiast, and keep up the great work.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time.